Okay. Greetings. This is the Independent Black Voters on Facebook as we vet our primary candidates. We are nonpartisan and we promote the fact that we want both parties and nonpartisans to be educated and to vote. Our vote is not free. And we have my person here, my road dog here, Dr. Cosgrove. She's part of my vetting team. She brings a little balance to us. And today we have Leslie here, Leslie Cohen. Can you tell them your name so it's pronounced right? Tell them what you're running for, and then we'll start from there.
I'm Leslie Cohen, and I'm running for Assembly District 29.
Okay. And obviously I am in District 29. So not only do I get to vet you, I get to vote for the piece of people that we endorse.
I actually think you got cut out at the redistricting.
Oh, I'll have to double check.
I think you're kind of edged out a little if I remember exactly where you live.
I'll have to double check that. Yeah, I'm right by Green Valley Casino.
Right.
So I'll double check. So I might not get to vote for you, but I'll definitely get to decide whether we endorse you. So you are an incumbent, correct?
Yes.
And tell us why you decided to run in the first place. Give us your history. Tell us a little bit about you.
So I was appointed to serve in the 2013 session when the person who had run and won was not able to serve. And I had never really been involved in politics before. I had been very active in the community, but not in politics so much. And so it was an opportunity to be involved in a different way in the community. And I found serving very rewarding. And I found that I was able to really be very, it was another way to serve and to get things done for my community. And I thought that I did a good job and that I brought a good perspective to the work. We do have a lot of attorneys in the legislature, that is true, but I do work with the legislation on a daily basis. So I know what it's like to sit there and use the legislation and kind of think, why did they do this? Why did no one ask this question or think of this? And to do the research, to do that legislative history research and kind of see that no one asks certain questions. And so that I'm always, when I'm in Carson City, I'm always asking myself, what is the question that someone's going to ask 10 years from now about whatever we're doing, and making sure that we're asking the question, trying to think of what those questions are going to be.
Okay, great. So you've been here for a while. I'm going to ask you, what are the three most legislation, what are the three items that you're proud of the most that you participated in and made happen?
I think I've been really active with the disability community since I've been in the legislature. And so we've passed a few different bills together. In the last legislative session, we passed AB 121, which is a bill to ensure that disabled voters can vote from home, which if you ever watch the hearings for AB 121 in the 2021 session, you will just be blown away by the testimony and how important it is for some disabled voters to be able to vote at home, and how this allows them to have privacy. This allows them to have an ability to vote in a way without having someone watching them or doing it for them. That was just really important in their lives, and it was really just a very important bill for people, and I was really proud to be able to be a part of that. Other bills, there are so many, whether it was bills that I brought myself or that I was able to vote for. I was so proud to be able to vote for the death penalty ban in the last legislative session. I'm sorry it didn't pass, but I will vote for that anytime I can. I was so proud we were able to get that out of the assembly. And then also able to vote for, being able to vote for the ERA. That was a huge deal. And I'm so glad that we're going to be able to also, have that continue in Nevada.
Okay.
But we took, even just in the last, even just when you talk about the last session, being able to address mining, mining is still being protected in the Constitution, but being able to, have mining come to the table and have some funds coming from mining now going into education. There's just so many things.
Okay. Tell me again, this is the independent Black voters. I'm going to ask some questions. Right now, 58% of the people across the nation are not happy with both parties. We're seeing growth in the nonpartisan group more than anyone else. So this is a two-part question. Number one, why do you think there's so much dissatisfaction with both parties? And number two, what is your stance and belief on open primaries? Because 33% of the people now are being left out of the opportunity to select people in the primaries and to bring the best of the best candidates to the forefront.
Right. I think we hear a lot of noise. And what happens is in the primaries, we have, right, there's often extremism on both sides that we hear about in the primaries. And I think we also hear talking points about each other and the extreme, we hear things said about the other side that is extreme and not necessarily accurate. I've heard things said about myself, right? I've heard, and I've seen mailers about myself, right, from my opponents on the other side over the years that I am, you would think that I was, this side of, the farthest left communist ever, which, is far from the truth, but that's the way it's portrayed in a general election, right? So I think that type of thing is part of why you have dissatisfaction among many of the voters. Right. I think that would be a big concern about voters. I think when you have a chance to talk to someone one-on-one, that's when you can connect. But a lot of times people are so disheartened, they don't want to connect. And it's a shame. I canvass a lot. I've always canvassed, whether it's a primary race or a general race. I'm at the doors of voters, nonpartisans, Republicans, Democrats. I'm at those doors. And, I have great conversations with all of the voters from different parties when they want to engage. I've had great conversations with Republicans that I knew were never going to vote for me, but we're still able to engage and have great conversations. And then there are people, again, nonpartisans, Republicans, Democrats, who do not want to talk at all. Doesn't matter what the conversation is. And that's a real shame. As far as open primaries, I'm not there. I'm not there yet. I do feel that we still have a two-party system right now. And I think that as long as we've got that two-party system, that party should be able to determine who they are going to be sending into the general.
If we have a two-party system let's say 100
or we're a multi-party system, but those parties should be able to determine who they're sending into the general.
We have a multi-party system that, let's face it, the two parties are the ones who always win. But 1/3 of the nation, 1/3 of the population is not being able in the primaries to vote, where they're going to be forced pretty much to vote or either give up their vote, make it worthless. Don't you think that if there was more of an open primary, that people would stop sliding to the right and sliding to the left and potentially be themselves and win, because they're who themselves, then I have to go far right, I have to go far left just to get the primary nomination. But knowing that right now, and I identify as a independent, but I do pick a side in the primaries and vote. But the frustration of all of us are, we're tired of picking the lesser of the two evils. And that's the perception, because that third of us are being left out of the decision making. And now we're told, pick one of these people. And we're like, well, we don't like either one of them. And we know the third party's not going to win.
But I don't think it's necessarily that the candidate is the one that is going to the extreme. I think it's that sometimes the conversation around the candidate is going to the extreme. Like in the example about myself, I'm not going to the extreme when I'm talking about the issues that are, where I stand on these issues. But when you see a mailer about me, it's going to be, or against me, it's going to be to the extreme.
Okay, I got you. But right now, the perception of people who are who are leaving both parties are, the party is far right or the party is far left. The perception is one party is a socialist, the other one is, the other one is more of a far right. So the perception of the parties, it's not just that, is so negative right now. That's why that people are abandoning the party affiliation, but they would like to be able to vote. Say if I'm voting and I like this person who's a Republican and I like this person who's a Democrat, that they can turn around and vote for that person. So we get the best candidates in here. Because right now, because of the structure it is, we're not getting the best candidates, nor are we getting the best message. If there's an understanding that if I go far right and I'm basically talking like a like a white supremacist, and I'm talking this way, that I can't win a primary, then these people would basically go back under the rocks they are. There are people who are talking socialism to a point where people are afraid of socialism, but by the time you look at what the agenda is from the party, it looks more like a socialist party than a Democratic party. So there's some issues that we believe that open primaries will force the cream to the crop and stop the right now to say what I have to say to get elected into the primary, and then basically hope I win the general election by trying to get that 30% that couldn't participate to believe that I'm one of them. But
Yeah,
we'll talk.
Huh? Yeah, and again, I don't feel like I've had to do that. I haven't had to go to an extreme in the primary.
Okay. Well, I'm not just talking about you. I'm talking about the overall process. And again, as a person who was a Democrat all of my life, as a person who tends to vote Democrat, not because, man, that's the greatest person, is because it's the lesser of the two evils. It's time for us to stop having to believe that's where we're being forced to vote. So we'll talk more on that, but that's a very big issue. So now I'm going to tell you, this is the independent Black voters. You gave me three items that you voted for right now. Right now, we have major problems with income inequality. We have major problems with social justice. When you look at the Black community, because I'm here to talk about the Black community, not women, not diversity. We have been left off the table many times. And there are even things on the docket where they're supposed to, when they're government type projects, they're supposed to be counting the amount of people by race to try to make sure there is inclusion and not just the illusion of inclusion. What do you think about that? And how do you think we can actually fix this? Because right now everybody's in trouble. But I always say that when America or Nevada gets a cold, Black folks get pneumonia because we're being locked out of opportunities.
So are you talking statewide or are you talking nationally? What do you, what
are you talking contracts, Brian?
I'm talking contracts right now, and I'll give you a great example. I was not a proponent. We spent $750 million for the stadium, and there was a promise of what they called. They said that everybody would rise with the tide. They said that they had put together a group, and a lot of them looked like me, that was going to be the community based forum to make sure there was fairness and equity. I spent a year trying to talk to them about the amount of Black workers and Black businesses that were actually participating in the build of the stadium. When it was all said and done, everybody came to our community and praised how much that everybody would rise for the tide. But at the end, we got business as usual, and people just throw up their hands and say, "Oh, we tried. We just couldn't find any good qualified Black folks." We need some people who are going to be strong about really diversity and not using as a word that means anybody but us. So give me your thoughts on what we can do as a state to really get serious about when we do contracts, when we're working with people, that we are truly inclusionary of all people. But really, I'm talking about Black people, because it seems like there's a lot of inclusion with everybody but us.
Right, and I don't, I'm not going to tell you what your feelings are and the way you should feel. I don't know that everyone feels that way.
Absolutely.
I don't know that that's necessarily, I think we have made strides over the years. I know that we have had a lot of legislation over the years trying to address issues like that. Trying to make sure that we've addressed making sure that we're dealing with bias in education, bias with healthcare, and making sure that we're having a more overall, that our approach to addressing all of these issues is more thorough and considerate. As far as the stadium, I mean, I was not part of that session when we had the stadium. I know that it's been, you're not the first person to raise the issue. I know, I've heard labor also raise the issue about being concerned about what really happened. And, but I don't know what the numbers ended up being. I know there should, have you looked at the reports? Are there actual reports with the numbers of
For a year, they told me to go figure them out myself, because they know the numbers, but they never wanted to come out of their mouths. But that's just an example. Again,
right.
What I need is legislators who get serious about it, real inclusion. And we actually stop just putting in legislation like we did in the past, where we counted the amount of people, but we did nothing with the results. Or we put in legislation, and a lot of times we put in legislation where contractors are told to give it the college try to get people in, and all they have to do is say, we tried and we couldn't find anybody. So we need stronger legislation for inclusion. A great example is the historic West Side, which historically, up until the 60s, Black people were forced to pretty much live there. And as it goes through gentrification, very few Black folks are helping to build that location, or any location. So all we need to at least be a conscious effort to make sure that real diversity includes Black folks, and not is just women and minorities other than us. So that's a key issue. But let's jump. I'll jump to some other, and I appreciate it. I am not the easiest person. That's why I tell you, we don't give people questions, and you get a lot of kudos for the fact that you came on and talked to me. There are a couple of your constituents, even some who look like me, who seem to have a problem having these tough calls. So I thank you on that, and I give you a lot of kudos there. Right now, water is a major issue in Nevada and the cost of housing and inflation. So we're going to start off with housing. Uh, it is completely disjointed to the fact of the average person is being actually driven out of the home model. The young people have given up on home ownership and they just want affordable rent. That's not the American dream. Give me your thoughts on the housing market here, what you think the problems are and what you think the solutions are.
I think it was a good start for us to get to wrap around on the short-term rentals. I think that was taking a lot of housing off of the market, which I know a lot of people weren't happy with, right? A lot of people were making money and supporting themselves on short-term rentals. And I'm not exactly sure what the county did. That just came out yesterday that they finished their work on that. But I think that was an issue that we needed to have some control over. And hopefully that will help. I think we need to, I know the governor did a lot of work over the last few months, right? Used a lot of the federal funds to get some development going. I think we're going to need to also be looking at doing a lot of filling in, right? We don't want to just keep growing out, but filling in. There's just no easy answers.
Okay, so
I think we looked at,
go ahead. I'm sorry.
the fact that it was after the 17 session that Senator Rowdy had a commission that she put together in the interim, that all they did was study housing. I think even she said after that, what she realized is that she thought they'd come up with solutions, and that there just aren't those easy solutions. It's not just like, let's just get a lot of smart people together and we'll come up with easy solutions. We came up with some things last session, like, allowing people to be able to do those tiny homes and things like that, because those are just some little things along the way to try to help to make differences for some people. But there's just no easy solutions.
Okay, great. Well, I'm not, obviously you have a lot of high-powered people, and I'm not a high-powered consultant, but I'm a person who looks at things kind of realistically. Right now, 18 to 20% of all of our homes are being purchased by corporate America. That's a major problem right now, because homes are created by supply and demand. And when corporations who have a flush of money because of all the free money they got from PPP, they can pay cash. So they've been coming in and outbidding the people looking for affordable homes and driving up the cost. Just like a lot of things we're doing right now with inflation that we're blaming the war. We don't, a lot of times, because of corporations and the money they put in to politics, want to talk about that problem and say we don't know. If we basically drove out the people who are buying up the homes that are corporations, because I'm a believer that the American dream has always been home ownership, and single family homes were that part of the American dream that gave us a chance to move up into the middle class and beyond. And if corporations are coming in, buying up 20%, they're inflating and driving up the cost. They're driving out the other persons, they're driving up the rent, and they're making great wages, but we don't want to talk about it. Even now, when I hear people say that, I say, right now, the HOAs said that since the political people won't do it, we're going to put in rules to make it so that these corporations that are coming in and buying up our communities can't do it. But we hear, when we talk to politicians, they say they don't know. But right now, I'm not very smart, but I can tell you, if you drove them out of the business, we wouldn't see housing appreciating by $90,000 in 1 year. We wouldn't see what's going on. And now that we're increasing the the mortgage rates, the only people in the game will be the people who have all the money, i.e. corporations. So it's going to get worse further than better. We need to get politicians willing to really talk about the real problem, because it's not the only problem. But right now we have corporation, we have greed, and we basically have an attack on the one last I'm going to say generational wealth item, which was home ownership by corporate America. And we sit here and we ignore what the real problem is. It's all about greed. It's all about fast cash. It's all about, again, tying the middle class up into a harder way to even remain middle class. So I give that to you as a thought as we go forward. I've talked to so many people, and behind the scenes, people say, Brian, you're right, but that would be political suicide if I talked about that. So we have to get our politicians to be more ingrained into the people and not political suicide. So I just want you to think about that, because everybody seems to not want to really talk about what's going on. There is an assault. You have places where they're building single family homes that can't be sold to people because they've gone to corporations so that they can set them up to rent until they get to the price they want to sell. Sandra, you're my road dog. You kind of keep me level. Is what I'm saying make sense?
It does. And actually, Anjanette Damon, who used to be with the Reno Gazette Journal, she's now with ProPublica. She's on a team with ProPublica that's actually documented what Brian's talking about, that these hedge funds are going into the major markets like Clark County and gobbling up properties. And sometimes they're just holding on to them to drive the price up. But a lot of time they're holding them and then they're renting them out. And when you own a large share of the market, they're just driving the rents up. And so that's where the HOAs are coming in. They're saying, if you don't live here, you don't get a rent here. And so I think they're able to kind of slowly, start to push back. But it so much reminds me of what happened 10 years ago when the flippers started coming in and we had like people from overseas. And so then I get really nervous because we know what happened when everything kind of crashed with that. But, I've had conversations too with some of the legislators, and, that's going to be a hard thing to because they're using like LLCs and they're kind of being shadowy about how many houses each hedge fund's purchasing. So I don't even know how you would discover them.
Well, it's easy. If you're not a home buyer, raise the damn taxes so high that it is very unattractive to not be a homeowner buying a single home. Raise the taxes, raise the when you sell, that so much of that money goes directly to taxes that it is no longer attractive to businesses to do that. And like I said, I may not be that smart. I'm not a high price consultant, but I can see the forest for the trees. And until our people and again until our elected officials start to really dig deep. I mean, this wasn't digging deep. This was really scratching the surface. Understand that they have to stand for American people first and do something. And so we're going to go to the next thought. And again, this kind of ties hand in hand. Homelessness, due to what's going on right now. Well, actually, I got to go back. There was a lot of issues pushed out about affordable homes. But when you peel back the onion, you had to be at least, I think, 60% or 40% of the average mean income. So a majority of people actually, even though they're building these homes, the people who are middle class, this is not going to help their issues right now with what's going on here. So even though it sounds good, and then it's in the future, it's not going to deal with the deals we have right now. And so that takes us to the second thing of homelessness. This is becoming a major issue in Clark County. Obviously, as the prices of inflation, the price of food is going up, the price of gas is going up, the price of housing is going up. People are starting to decide, do I live in the street or do I feed my family? What can we do? What's your thought that we can do now to kind of address that problem and not wait till the tsunami comes like we did with water? How can we deal with that now? Because it's here too.
Right. And I think what we're seeing is a lot of couch surfers right? It's not so, a lot of people we're seeing not necessarily on the street yet, but surfing from family member to family member, from friend to friend. And these are people who have jobs and are working, just can't afford rent. Yeah, I get it. And we're working at the state level, at the county and the cities, trying to come up with ways to help. Like I mentioned, we did pass some legislation to be able to make sure that people can do the tiny houses, which sounds like, it almost sounds like a joke, but it's not. It's absolutely serious, trying to, allowing for the tiny home communities so that people can be housed in a safe environment that's clean, that's comfortable. That's one way to have, to allow people to have a place to live. That's a start. The governor just, had his program that he just put out within the last few weeks. That's millions and millions of dollars for housing within the state.
Yep.
So
And
I
Lisa,
think,
I
that's
think,
where we're moving.
yeah. Okay, Lisa, I thank you, because again, these are tough questions. And just like you say, it makes me laugh a little bit. It says the new American dream, affordable or tiny house, pick one. Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
No, I get it. I understand. I mean, it's.
Yeah.
I remember a few years ago, I mean, this was when Sandra was talking about the bubble 10 years ago. I remember the school district was putting out, and I'm not knocking the school district for this, but I remember how odd I thought it was that they were for housing for teachers. Like the idea was they had I don't know if it was a website or it was like a literal bulletin board for roommates. And like, that was the plan of like, hey, here's what we can do for housing, because housing is so expensive, teachers couldn't afford it. And there was like a bulletin board for, like, because that's how bad housing had gotten. So yeah, it's definitely an issue, and it's hopefully, we'll see some movement with the money that we got from the feds that the governor put together, and we can see some progress there. But it's an issue, and I am hopeful that now that we're seeing some movement, and that we passed some legislation last session having to do with the short-term rentals, and that the county was able to use that and has put forth some regulation that those homes will now be able to be mostly used for actual residents as opposed to short-term rentals.
It's funny because that'll make the strip happy, because there'll be less places to rent. So they're probably really happy about that. That'll hurt the person, the mom and pops maybe, but again, the corporations are happy about everything.
No, there are corporations. So it's kind of odd. There are actual corporations that do short-term rentals as well. And there's an area in Lake Tahoe where there's one of the beaches in Lake Tahoe that's all corporate rentals on Lake Tahoe, but there's also in other parts of the state where it's corporate short-term rentals. It's yeah,
you're right. You're right.
There's both. There's always corporations that are going to.
Okay, two more questions and I'll have you off the hot seat. So thank you very much. Water. We are at a major problem. It's hard for me to believe we didn't know this and see it coming, because many times we were hearing from Southern Nevada water company, oh, everything's okay. But it's another one of those where you could literally open your eyes even prior to this and see that it was not okay. We're at a point where literally, I think the average person doesn't know how bad we are from a water aspect. What do you think are going to be the solutions to kind of address this problem? Because literally the desert may retake itself and become the desert again if we don't have solutions.
Yeah, I think if you're looking at high-tech solutions, there's looking at desalination. and seeing if we can get something worked out where we're trading water. That sounds almost crazy, where we're trading water, where we pay to desalinate water off the coast of Mexico, and we end up with other water that we trade for water from off the coast of Mexico that we pay to desalinate. That is an actual possibility. But I think we also, there are still more things that can be done. We need, we got rid of having businesses have turf that's merely decorative. I think more people need to get rid of grass in their front yard, get rid of turf in their front yard. There's more we could be doing to conserve water.
Yes, because this is a major problem. It's one that people don't understand. And when we get to the point, it's going to be a point where water is more valuable than oil and gas. We need some solutions. What about moratoriums on building? It seems like people are afraid to talk about stuff because a lot of people, and I've heard that they were like, well, we recapture a percentage, but the bottom line is we are growing to a city that's not able to sustain the water. Why would we continue to grow? And I just need your opinion. What about a moratorium that says, you know what, we got to take a breath and pause on our growth here until we can basically make sure we can sustain what we have today?
We also need to house people. So I don't know that we're ever going to be willing to do a moratorium on growth, but we do need to make sure that we're growing in a smart way. I'd like to see us doing more filling in than moving out. And I think that's still possible.
Okay. Tough question. I know there's no solutions. Now, education. We have a lot of people, I'm for school choice, I'm against full school choice. Basically, it's the old shell game. Let me basically pick a side, move it around and do nothing. What do you think are the biggest problems with our educational system right now? And what do you think we could do quickly to fix it?
There's no quick answers.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, if there were easy answers, we would have done it. If there was something that could just be done, it would have been done. Whether it was, whether it was the Dems the majority, when the Republicans were the majority, if there was something that could have been done, it would have been done. A few years ago, I spoke to one of the someone who had been on the school board in the 90s, and she was telling me in the 90s, they were just, the area was growing so much that they were just concentrating on trying to build schools. And I think we're still seeing the ramifications from the 90s when they were just trying to build the schools because we're growing so quickly. I think you can have people of good intentions on all the different sides with absolutely genuinely held beliefs, and we still, there just isn't an easy way out. There isn't one solution and there isn't an easy solution. We have buildings that are getting older. We have crowded schools. In the last few years, we've put more money into education, which is really good and a really good start. But there are a lot of issues. And then we have some issues that are no one's fault. We have issues, for instance, with transiency. That is not a teacher's fault. That is not a school district's fault. But that is an issue that impacts, how a teacher teaches, that impacts how, we're not even talking about the student themselves, but a school there's no way to teach to a child that lives a transient lifestyle. And we know we have high numbers of transiency with these students. I think, we don't celebrate what we do well in this state, and we do things well with education in this state. We never hear about that. Look at how well SECTA's doing. Look at the fact that SECTA just, it came out just last week, I think, that SECTA is the top magnet school in the country. We never hear about those good things that we have going on in the state for education. But I think on top of that, I think we have to just keep plugging along. I think clearly there still is more money needed, and we'll try to get more funds into the schools. And we just have to keep doing the best and continuing to try to make the schools better, to have more schools so that we can try to work on the overcrowding and make sure that teachers have the supplies they need and students have the supplies they need.
Can I jump in now, Brian? Because I was going to ask education related questions.
Okay.
So I think I want to bring up something that as soon as I say it, you're going to go, oh yeah, we all know that that's a problem. Oftentimes when I go to meetings with my Black friends, I try to just sit in the room and really listen as intently as I can to what's being said. And the frustration you hear in Brian's voice when he's talking about that the vendor contracts for the stadium did not go to Black people, that they're rebuilding the West Side and it's not a lot of Black contractors. I hear this over and over, that there was something that was supposed to have a really good outcome and there was really good intent, but then the implementation fell apart and that there wasn't oversight on how it was being implemented. And I hear this especially with my teacher friends, that there's legislation that goes through our in a session and wherever, and then we don't talk about it again until the next legislative session. But in the meantime, it's not getting implemented. There was something that got left out. There's language that was muddled. There wasn't enough resources. Restorative justice is one of those things that we've been hearing about. And that gets everybody mad and frustrated. But there's nowhere for them to go and say, hey, I need this fixed. They get told, well, we don't have another legislative session for another year. So sorry, you're out of luck. Then things just get worse and worse and people get angrier and angrier because there's nowhere to go to fix things. And so to me, one of the solutions is we're going to need to have annual sessions, because too often, and I know you've seen this too, people do, gallant work during the legislative session, but you just can't fix everything in 120 days. But then there's nowhere to go when it falls apart or there's an implementation problem. Maybe you can go to interim finance, maybe you go to legislative commission. So I think there's going to have to be like a recognition that saying that something fell apart in the implementation is not blaming legislators. They did their best. But then also recognizing that the community is saying this fell apart and I don't know what to do with it and I'm really angry about it. There's nowhere for people to come together and figure out what to do when that happens. And so more and more, I'm getting to the point where it's like, I've got to really do everything I can to prioritize annual sessions to say we could probably fix a lot of our education issues if teachers and principals and people like Brian could go to the actual legislature, not go to interim committees that had power to actually fix things when there's an implementation problem. And I know that you're thinking, yeah, I know exactly what she's talking about, because I've seen you be frustrated over those things too.
I mean, I've certainly had my own bills that, yeah, because I have a job, during the interim, I have bills that I'm checking on while I have the job. And I have,
right,
constituents that I'm trying to take care of and a life and campaign and things like that. So yeah, I don't think most of us would disagree with that. And I think we've, there's been efforts and we've tried, and yeah.
I've been there helping push that boulder up the hill, and then it rolls back on us every single time.
I don't think anyone would dispute that. I think we've voted for it and we've tried. And
yeah. First of all, again, I have to continue to commend you because, like I said, I have respect for anybody who sits down for our interviews. So I have mad love and respect for you sitting here and answering questions openly without them early. Some people, they only will come if they have their answers early. They only come on other things. You're sitting here, so you get a lot of kudos there. I have to continue to say that you get a lot of kudos with me. The fact that you're sitting here and answering tough questions, not softball questions. I want to give you an example, something to think about. Throwing money is not always the solution to the school district. It doesn't take, and you know, again, I say that I don't know a whole lot, but I have an undergrad in electrical engineering technology. I have an MBA from Purdue University. I'm not dumb, but there's some obvious things from my engineering background of root cause. I spent since I'm an entrepreneur, I said 4 weeks at Swanigan just to see what was going on and see if I could move the dial for people that were pre-algebra, algebra. And the thing that hit me that was so obvious, number one, if you were to separate the results, it follows the economics base. In other words, I lived in Henderson. My kids got a pretty good education because economically we were in pretty good shape. We were stable. We didn't worry about whether we're going to get evicted next week. We didn't worry about a lot of other issues. There's a direct correlation. Sometimes money gets thrown at everybody and it goes to the people who need it the least. Because like you say, we have great jobs with some of these charter schools and magnet schools, etc. But the problems really lie into areas. When I went to Swanigan, they had not one teacher to teach algebra. I was a substitute teacher with a background in algebra, and I saw kids significantly increase their knowledge of algebra just because they had somebody who could relate to their culture. And I'm talking about Hispanic or Black, who wasn't afraid of them. They could tell after a while that I was giving them tough love. At first, they thought I was just tough, but I'm not afraid of them. And I stayed there long enough. In that school, every week there was a new, a new substitute teacher that would be run out in a week. At the end of the session, they wanted to give everybody C's because they had not taught them, because they did not have the teachers. If you look at it, it's a direct correlation. The highest areas of schools that have substitute teachers have the lowest performance. It's not that hard. So if we actually start focusing on those areas and not always, like you say, God bless the magnet schools. God bless what's happening in Summerlin. God bless what's happening in Henderson. They're great talking points. But a lot of times we like to talk about that and say, you know, our issues here is we need to staff. We need, one of the quick simples, it's hard because you have to maybe pay more money and you have to fight the teachers union, but you got to find ways to staff those schools that have had substitute teachers at the highest percentage on a constant basis. Even if you have to bring people who aren't teachers but have the background, maybe they're retired out of the out of corporate America and they really know math, or they really know that, and I'm going to pay them more than I pay teachers. Not try to bring them in as substitute teachers, but I'm going to give them marks and say we're going to pay you on performance. But there are ways to increase it. But the biggest problem is we throw money at it and we don't do root cause analysis, or we come back and we pay these consultants who really, I mean, I can look at this by spending 4 weeks and said the major problem we have is directly correlated to economics. And as you just said, transient people are in the lower economic stratosphere of people. And then just as you said, so if we actually sat down and stopped trying to actually, I guess, avoid the problem, there are some fixes, and it may require spending some money targeted. I mean, a lot of money in the maybe 10 or 15% of the bottom, and saying we're going to fill these classrooms with qualified either teachers or qualified people. And then we're also going to try to be more diverse, because most of those areas are predominantly Black and Hispanic. And Black and Hispanic, especially men or boys, will end up being able to have a better, I guess, rapport with someone who looks like them and they can respect. That would even take a lot of this stuff with the fights and stuff going in. The truth of the matter is, if you look at our makeup of teachers, even in our school system, it doesn't reflect the overall population. And if you look in the areas that are hurting the worst, the teachers who don't look like the people in there, unless they're getting paid a lot of money, they're not going to be there. And a lot of them, I'll quietly say, retire in place for a couple of years so they can get that little stipend and then they can go off and retire. So we have to look at some stuff about targeted solutions right now. And I think they're out there, and it's not just about throwing money at it. So that's just a little thoughts. Professor Cosgrove, do you think I'm on point?
No, you're right. But and a lot of these schools need counselors and psychologists and all this. But those are problems that need not a part-time legislature. We need to give our legislators the time to think through these things and really drill down. 120 days just goes, and then it gets all disjointed as who's trying to really get a hold of the problem. And again, it's the school board's got a piece, the legislature's got a piece. Those are the problems we need to have dedicated people that have the time and the quiet mind to actually deal with them.
Absolutely. Well, like I said, do you have any comments on what I said? You're almost off the hot seat.
Well, yeah, I will say, however, that I would point out that when it comes to money, I think what's kind of interesting, though, when you're talking about being in Green Valley, I don't want to name names, but I think it's kind of sometimes the opposite of what you mentioned, though, as far as what schools have what money, because I remember talking to a PE teacher on a school that actually might have been a school that your kids were zoned for, because it's right down the street, but I don't want to name names. And I always thought of it as a pretty wealthy school. And I was talking to the PE teacher, and she was whatever it's called when you rethread it was like the tennis rackets, and she was like restringing the tennis rackets. She said she has no money, and I thought, this is kind of like a well-to-do school. And then I was talking to her, and I've talked to some teachers, and we were talking about how sometimes it's the Title I schools that actually do have more money than the middle class schools. So sometimes there is that, dichotomy that's there, that sometimes they actually, I don't know, I just thought that was kind of an interesting,
and that's,
that you don't necessarily think about, that sometimes, some schools don't have what you think they have, and other schools do have the money, but maybe don't have the teachers.
But exactly, you hit on it. Having the money without the teachers,
right,
is like having no money, period.
right.
Because like you say, even though you get the money, if you can't, and some of them have to make a decision, I'm going to spend the money to get some resources for my people, for my kids. Because like you said, even if we have less money, you're still in a socioeconomic, our parents, we had the money to make sure they needed what they wanted. They had the stability. And you know what? They had people who look at home, at least, who look like them. We had the opposite, but we had, obviously my sons grew up to a two-parent household. They had the structure of a two-parent household, a Black male who was a parent and a father. And what I'm saying is, in the socioeconomic areas that are lower, you don't have that two parents. Sometimes you don't have that strong father figure, and you don't even get it in the schools. See, I grew up in Gary, Indiana. My school was predominantly Black. My teachers were 97, 98% Black. Many of them taught my parents. They lived in the communities. So therefore they had a commitment to the community to make sure that education happened there, even though there was a big structure from poor people to middle class to upper middle class there. Everybody got educated because the people cared, and they weren't just bust in because they're getting a higher salary, but they lived in Summerlin or lived in Henderson. And really, once I get out of there, this ain't my community. So it's just something to think about. I think there's some solutions if you target, but make sure that that money goes to the right places and stuff, and really getting the right people into the classrooms, not just $9-10 an hour, and now we're even worse because we're bringing kids who coming right out of high school and putting them in to teach, and they don't even know how to barely tie their shoe. Now we got them in as teachers. So you had babysitters, now you got friends who are teaching. That's a recipe for disaster. But again, Leslie, you've taken the time, and again, I can't thank you more. People like you that are willing to sit here on the hot seat, to ask tough questions, to be able to give their opinion and to listen is what we need in the state assembly and throughout. Right now, and I said this earlier, 58% of the people are not happy with either side of Congress, Republicans or Democrats. And we need to understand why. And that's because people are not listening to us. They're listening to the 1/3 that are Republican, the 1/3 are Democrat, and they're not listening to a big chunk of the people who really say, hey, just because I'm not in your party doesn't mean I shouldn't get an invitation, or I shouldn't have a chance to run. I mean, to make sure your parties bring in the right people. Does that make sense?
Yep. No, I get it.
All right. Okay. I thank you again. What I'm gonna say first, I'm gonna sign Miss Dr. Cosgrove. Do you have anything to say before we let Leslie give her information and take it home?
Just one thing. So the voter registration numbers came out yesterday for April, and the nonpartisan voter registration was at 2.22%. It was over 11,000 people, and a lot of them are my students, and they do feel the way Brian feels. And they're going to be upset when they realize, when they get that mail-in ballot and the top of the ticket's not there, and they're going to have to reaffiliate, and it's going to be kind of a mess for them. But the political parties in Utah have just private conventions where they do endorsements and they pick their candidates. So I think there's other ways that the party could still have influence over who they want their candidates to be. But I think until we can get to a point where people do really want to affiliate with the party, if you've got 40% of the voters that are not affiliated and they're not in that primary, you're going to get extremism. I mean, there's going to be problems with what's coming out of the primary and people feeling disconnected. So I'm just hoping that there's a way for the parties to do what they want. They want to pick their nominees, that's fine. But the taxpayers are paying for the primary, and there's a lot of people who want to be engaged that are not going to feel really connected. That worries me about what they're going to do when we get to the general election. You know, who they're going to want to vote for if they don't feel connected. So I think there's got to be ways to work this out.
Okay, I'll take a look at what they're doing in Utah.
Yep, because they just had their conventions and they just did their pick their nominees, and it was the reporters were on Twitter and they were tweeting about it and stuff. And so there are states where they're doing the convention first and then getting people out onto the ballot where they compete with the nonpartisans.
Absolutely. There needs to be a solution. So again, I thank you first, Professor Cosgrove, for always having my back. I thank you. I really do. Leslie, I'm disappointed I don't get to vote in your area again. So I have to find out who I have to interview. But thank you again. Now you can give your information and tell people why they need to consider voting for you.
So I'm Leslie Cohen, representing Assembly District 29, running for Assembly District 29 to represent you again. Hoping for your vote. I have an open door policy regardless of party. So you can call me at 702-715-0772. Reach out to me on Twitter or Facebook. You can also email me LESLEYCOHENAD29@gmail.com. I grew up in the area. Feel like I've done a good job representing the area, having an open door, and yeah, I've been hitting the doors, been out in the neighborhoods, but so if there's anything in particular you'd like to discuss, please feel free to get a hold of me and we can talk about those issues. And thank you for having me today.
Thank you. This is Independent Black Voters on Facebook, folks. Our vote is not free. We have to be informed voters. We have to ask the tough questions. We have to make sure that we are all involved in what's going on. We have to stop telling the folks that this is the most important election ever. All elections are important. It is important that all people be informed and that they vote in all elections, because look what's happening when you give up. Again, June is the primary. Many of the races will be determined in the primary. Be an informed voter and vote. Peace. Hold on.